Nintendo of America loses its president. EA drops its online plans. And IBM gets out of the PC biz. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome along to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to see what was making headlines in the computer and video game industry 20, 30, and 40 years ago. I'm your favorite co-host, Mads, and with me as always, I have Carl. Say hello, Carl.
Hi, Mads.
That felt weird.
That felt weird. It's the first time that's ever happened. Wow.
So did I get it right?
You got it perfect. Perfect. Cool. Wait, can you do the rest of the show? Because I kind of like this. I'm just going to sit back and let it flow.
I think I probably better leave it in your capable hands, mate.
Well, okay. As Mads perfectly stated, welcome back. We are back for another wonderful episode, this time jumping back 20 years to February of 2002. So, but before we can do that, let's do some banter. Mads, what have you been up to?
So I've been playing Day of the Tentacle recently because we're playing that on the Game Club, and I picked up a long time ago the remastered version that was done by Double Fine, which is Tim Schafer's current company. He was, of course, the main man, him and Dave Grossman, behind Day of the Tentacle. And man, that game is still just as brilliant today as it was 29 years ago when it was released. And
yeah,
that really makes me feel old, by the way, because that game is just modern gaming to me. It looks like playing a cartoon, and it's 29 years old. But hey.
Yeah. It's one of those games. Now, the only thing that aged it for me, and I have to admit, I did not get to play it when it came out.
Okay.
Because it was the first LucasArts game that did not get ported to the Amiga.
Ah, yes.
So I was stuck in this limbo of I got to watch the intro at a friend's house. I got to read all the reviews in the magazines. I actually read through not one, but two walkthroughs in magazines. But I did not actually get to play the game probably until must have been 98 or 99.
Wow.
Yeah, and the only thing that dated it for me was there's these occasional little lapses in time when it's jumping between audio tracks. And now I'm guessing that they fixed that in the remastered version, right?
Yes, there's nothing like that here.
Okay. Now I may actually have to go back and revisit it because that was the only thing that goofed it for me in the late 90s.
So in 93, when this was released, I didn't have a CD-ROM drive, so I bought the I think it was 7 floppy disk version that was there, and it only had speech on the intro.
Yeah,
but I remember installing those 7 floppy disks, which would have taken up a huge amount of space on my megabyte hard drive, of course, and showing it to my dad because I really wanted him to see that this is where we are today. This is what you can do with a computer. And I had just got my hands on a Sound Blaster, not a Sound Blaster 16, but the old 8-bit Sound Blaster card. And I still get goosebumps thinking about launching that intro for the first time and feeling like you're in this Bugs Bunny cartoon and you're actually controlling stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, with the bird flying by, and it starts off with what is it, Ode to Spring?
Yes.
And then you see the stuff hitting the river coming out of the mansion, and the bird starting to go.
Yeah.
It is brilliant. I mean, it's one of those moments. It's kind of like I don't want to. I'm not a huge jump and run fan, but I have to equate Day of the Tentacle, maybe Monkey Island 2. They're both kind of on the same level, but Day of the Tentacle really takes the production values to that next level, and it's similar to what Mario Brothers 3 did with jump and runs.
Yes.
It was
Agreed.
everything in there. It was perfectly timed. It was the masters at work. And in many ways, it never really gets surpassed by later point-and-click games.
For me, I still think, after replaying it, I've played many point-and-click games, also over the past couple of years, just playing some of the old stuff that I never played before. This is still the pinnacle of point-and-click adventure games for me. It's got everything just down to a T, the graphics, the sound, the humor, but every single puzzle as well is just so nicely balanced. The way that it plays with the passing things back and forth between the 200-year jumps that they are at in the time machine is just a really, really well designed game.
Exactly, and that perfect balance, it really makes it. I mean, and there's games later on that did have very good balance. It's just that was the first one where the production values and the balance all matched up. Yeah. In a way that we would still recognize as modern. Like you said, it feels still like a modern game. I mean, you go back to Monkey Island 2, the original version, the fact that there's no spoken sound is jarring.
Yeah,
it really takes you out of that. Now, granted, there is the remastered versions, but even then, the frames of animation are still the same as before.
Yeah, and while I love Monkey Island and Monkey Island 2, brilliant games in their own right, they are just not modern in design as Day of the Tentacle was. There are too many obtuse puzzles that are actually kind of hard to figure out even today. Whereas Day of the Tentacle is a game that everybody should be able to get through if they sit down and maybe play 10, 12 hours, because the puzzles make sense.
Well, and that's the thing. When they make sense in their own weird cartoon logic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, it is one of those pinnacle moments, and it's a beautiful game. I'm still a little miffed that they didn't call it Maniac Mansion 2 Day of the Tentacle.
Yeah, that's true.
The lack of reference to Maniac Mansion was a bit disheartening, but the fact that you could still play Maniac Mansion on the Commodore 64 that's in Junior's room is still an amazing add-on. Okay, now we've got our old man waxing poetically about their past moment of banter out of the way. Okay, we need to get ready for our trip back in time. And remember, everybody, when we talk about us going back to February of 2002, it's based on the publication, not publication dates, but the cover dates of magazines and newspapers. Therefore, all the stories that we're talking about obviously happened at some point before that. It is simply a convention. Do not send me hate mail. Now, before we can go, we have to send our intrepid co-host off to play one of the games that was tested in a publication dated February 2002. And we had many games to choose from this month. Among them, things like Alien vs. Predator 2, and Maximo, and Tekken Advance, and Kabuki Warriors, and, of course, VIP, which would have been cool just because the Pamela Anderson is in the news again. But the game is terrible. But we went with a game that, curiously enough, and this is one of the very few cases this has ever happened here on the show, a game that I haven't played before. Yes, but I saw it, and, well, given Mads' penchant for point-and-click adventures, it was just too succulent a morsel to pass up.
Yes, an easy choice.
It was like it was, dangling on a fish hook. And that game is The Fish Files for the Game Boy Color. Are you ready, Mads?
I am.
And 7 minutes in heaven.
Let's dive in.
Welcome back, Mads, from your 7 minutes in heaven. So, based off your experience with the game, to explain to the uninitiated what the Fish Files is.
So the Fish Files is a rather impressive feat on the Game Boy Color because it's a quite nice looking and very controllable point-and-click adventure. So it's a point-and-click adventure game. You're this guy, Dante, whose fish has been kidnapped, we guess, or at least it's disappeared. And other fish in the neighborhood have disappeared as well. So you need to go solve that puzzle, figure out who's taking all the fish. And I didn't get that far in my 7 minutes. You have direct control over Dante, so you control him with the D-pad, walking around the environment. Some really nice cartoony graphics, quite impressive on the very modest hardware that you have there with the Game Boy Color. And whenever you get close enough to something you can interact with, it'll get highlighted by this jumpy little triangle jumping up and down. And then you can either use the A or B button to, one of them inspects or looks at an object and the other interacts with it. So picks it up, for example, or pushes it or whatever it makes sense to do in the context. So quite a nice little experience and nice enough so that I actually went and ordered myself a flash card for my Game Boy Color because I think I need to finish this game on real hardware. I'm a sucker for a good point and click game.
As your reputation in such matters is well deserved. So, how now? It's a really good or cool looking point and click game. Good will be determined by the later puzzles.
Yes.
But how would you describe the art style?
So very, very cartoony, as you mentioned in the video edition that you can see if you're a patron of the show. It actually resembles.
Thank you, very subtle.
It actually resembles the cartoony art style of something like Day of the Tentacle, for example. So a Warner Bros-esque Bugs Bunny, something like that, Looney Tunes style, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And it's using very it looks like scanned painted artwork for the backgrounds.
Yeah.
With pixel by pixel cartoon sprites.
Yeah, and you're right. It does look like scanned backgrounds because either that or they've really gone to town on the dithering effects because they do like make the humble Game Boy Color's color palette larger by using some dithering there.
Yeah, no, it looks very, very impressive. I mean, you could almost see them trying to replicate a Day of the Tentacle style game or a Sam & Max game in this engine. Now, obviously, there are some limitations, like how did the controls differ from what you would expect from a classic LucasArts game?
So in a classic LucasArts game, I would always be playing with a mouse. But if you took you've got direct control instead of pointing and clicking where you need to go. That's the main difference. Like you did in, actually it reminds me somewhat of Grim Fandango, apart from the 3D part. Because in Grim Fandango, you had direct control over Manny. And whenever he got close enough to something he'd interact with, he'd turn his head that way. Just look at it. So it wasn't as obvious as the jumping triangle we have in this game. But still, it's actually the same control method. You have direct control, and then sometimes you'll be in the vicinity of something you can interact with, and you press it there. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So Grim Fandango, Curse of Monkey Island, those games would be the ones that you normally would use a pre-rendered background with a 3D sprite.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Okay. A nice little game.
Very cool. Now, and I mentioned this also in the video, but this was one of only 2 games that I was aware of for the Game Boy Color that tried to do a point-and-click adventure. The other one was Scooby-Doo, the classic Creep Capers, which was really cool because it also did a similar thing to Day of the Tentacle where they split the party. Like in every episode of Scooby-Doo, and you could switch between them and try to solve the puzzles separately or in order. And I'm actually looking on Moby Games right now, and apparently these guys use this same game engine to do an Addams Family.
Oh, cool.
So also for the Game Boy Color. So that is something that I'm suddenly quite curious about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in the adventure category, Moby Games only has 5 games for the Game Boy Color. There's this, the Scooby-Doo game, the Addams Family game by the same developers, and then something with a Japanese name that I don't recognize, and one based on Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Okay.
But yeah, that looks very straightforward, broken perspective, top-down, something or other. I'm not even going to try to guess at that. Okay, so there we go. And the other one has no screenshots because it's a Japanese game. Okay, so if you were going to recommend this game to somebody, would you recommend this game to somebody?
So it's hard to recommend yet because I haven't actually seen any of the puzzles, but I can definitely recommend it on the graphics and the charm that seem to be there. I myself am going to take a deeper dive, but whether it's recommendable, I wouldn't know yet. I need to see the puzzle design, don't I?
Yeah, you do. And we will do a follow-up. Once you know, we can report on that at some future date.
Yes.
So remember, everybody, keep listening to the show, even if you don't like it, just to find out. Okay, then we're done with the 7 Minutes in Heaven segment, but before we can turn on the time machine, we have to check in with our good friend Ethan from the Department of Corrections.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So,
hey,
let's talk about January of 2002.
Let's talk about January of 2002. You have a lot to answer for, Carl. But before we can get to that, our second most frequent co-host gets another spot. It is the Mads Carl.
And it is?
You have an interesting tech development history. I want to hear more about this mobile game development stuff. This is the main reason that you shouldn't take out the 2000 jump, just so if Mads is on, that he can tell us more about his early mobile phone development.
This is true. Mads is a wealth and depth of information that has yet to be properly mined. So we've got a few years left to go. He will give us all the depth or something.
Okay, wonderful. And now we will go into the depths of your failure, Carl. Let's continue.
Let's hear it.
Into January 2002. So, Carl, you said the 10-year lifespan of the PS2 was quote-unquote unheard of. But that is not true, especially when you consider something like the Family Computer in Japan, which had an 11-year official lifespan, and then further on with support and whatnot into the future.
This is true. I kept forgetting the Famicom. That one, I missed it. Too bad. Yeah, Famicom beat it by a year.
I mean, honestly, they could have kept supporting the PS2 because it was so successful and whatnot, but they decided not to.
Well, I'm not quite sure. I know it kept going in South America and certain countries for a very, very long time, but that was probably just old stock.
Official support from Sony itself. Yeah. That's what we kind of count as the life.
Makes sense. Yeah. When was the official last game launched? Do we know?
I think 2010. I think that's about right.
Okay, yeah. So, 10 years. Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah. Okay. Yes, you're right.
And keeping on the subject of the PS2, so on the metrics of how powerful the generations were, the PS2 is less powerful than the GameCube. People have run these metrics before. So your perfect little narrative about how Nintendo's always behind the times is not true. Especially because with the N64 and the GameCube, it's actually a lot of the same people who made those chips. They were trying to go for the higher end. On the whole, Xbox, original Xbox, PS2 and GameCube are pretty comparable. Altogether, they if you look at the cross ports of those games, they're pretty much the same. But on a very specific level, if you're just talking about potential power, Xbox is the most powerful, GameCube is second, and PS2 is third.
And here there's very few games I think that are really good comparisons for this because of cross-platform, because the GameCube, there's a lot of games that didn't get ports to the GameCube. But for example, I looked up a comparison video of True Crime LA. And while the GameCube version does take advantage of things like the hardware compression for the textures, and that does make it look a little cleaner. As soon as you get into the car and start driving, the draw distance on the GameCube is considerably shorter than on the PS2 and the Xbox. Considerably shorter.
Well, yeah,
and I would probably say that that's because of the vector unit on the two vector unit chips on the PlayStation 2. If programmed properly, will still output a lot more objects on screen. They just won't look quite as pretty and crisp as the GameCube did. And there's a great article on IGN from back in the day where they interviewed Julian Egebrecht of Factor 5. And Factor 5 at that time was very much a Nintendo second-party developer. And Jason Rubin of Naughty Dog, and Gregory, I think it's Chezuk is his name, from BioWare. And BioWare was basically the free agent between them. And Egebrecht, from a technical standpoint, he said, if you use those vector units, he compares them to the Nintendo 64's math processors. Said if you use those really well, you could probably pull the same kind of tricks that they pulled on the N64 with games like Rogue Squadron to get a lot more power out of it than if you just tried to brute force it through the CPU. And that's where I don't know. Personally, just from my experience with the systems, GameCube always looked crisper, but and this was all coming out of a discussion about Grand Theft Auto 3, which gets canceled. I found the notice of them not porting it to the GameCube very, very early on. So just literally a month.
It was originally going to be a Dreamcast game. So.
Well, yeah, but the fact that they announced an Xbox port within a month of the release of the PS2 version, and a PC version, of course, was always in the cards. But GameCube immediately gets canceled out.
I think you're reading too much into it being a technical issue rather than an audience issue, especially because GameCube did not wind up being the success that it deserved to be. But, like I said, on the whole, after the fact, as people are running benchmarks on this stuff, GameCube is more capable. But the streaming from the disc, which is part of what you were saying, is different. And it also depends on the willingness of the developer. And if the developer feels like they're not going to sell a lot on the GameCube, they're not going to put a lot into the GameCube version. And this has always been the case on all these things.
Well, I'm just saying the problem is that this is coming right after the release of GTA 3, so it's right at the beginning of GameCube sales. So I don't think the number of units sold would have been a deciding factor at that point, just because it was way too early in the system's lifespan. And the same thing goes for the Xbox. Both of them were unproven, but they had still committed to the Xbox port. So
yeah, but there was more excitement around Xbox, and people had seen that Nintendo had fallen behind with the N64. But we're getting to market semantics here.
Yeah, now
yes,
true.
To say that the PS2 had many deficiencies on the whole, but as a general rule, pretty much all the systems were comparable. And there are a very scant a few number of games which were on all three systems, and they all basically look identical.
For the most part, yeah. Like I said, the only good one I could find that was comparable to GTA 3 was True Crime LA, and that really did have a considerable hit to the draw distance. But that might have just been poor programming.
Let us move on from this topic.
Yes.
And now on to the Famicom Microphone. So First of all, you were like, I don't think the Famicom microphone's on controller 2. Yes, it is. It was on controller 2, not controller 1. And that's one of the weird things about it. The other thing about it is it didn't have the ability to recognize voice at all. What you could do is you could put your mouth up to it, and you would speak into it, and then your voice would come in through the TV. So it was a pass-through into the sound system of your TV.
Okay. What was the point of that?
It was just a fun thing that Masayuki Uemura, the late great Masayuki Uemura, thought was fun. And just as Nintendo does, if something is just fun, then they might do it. So, and
Sounds
in
cool.
the case of the few games that can quote unquote recognize something, all they're doing is measuring decibel of what can come in. They don't recognize the voice.
Gotcha.
So you can just blow it in.
Similar to what was that terrible headset controller that was released for the NES? The one with
yeah, the Hyperscope, I think.
Something like that.
Norm covered that recently. On one of his videos.
Yeah, there was. That we can get it. There's a couple of peripherals like that over the years. Oh, they're terrible. Okay, yes.
Then after that, you were wondering, what is that Crystal Gathering game that was by the guys who did Pokemon Go? It is called Ingress.
Yes, thank you. Ingress. I completely forgot the name of that.
Yes. And it's still running as far as I know. So Niantic is still supporting that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's hugely popular with its crowd.
All right. I'm going to have to lay down another date thing on you, Carl. Once again, the Neo Geo did release in the U.S. in 1990. Stop saying it was 1991.
I keep getting that. For some reason, I have that one stored in my head in the wrong place. Bad Carl. Bad Carl.
Yes. Bad Carl. Just like a puppy dog. And also, I think you called Trip Hawkins the co-founder of 3DO, but I think he's the only founder of 3DO.
Oh, really?
I think he... Yeah, I mean, it was originally the San Mateo software, or whatever it was. But I believe that, I mean, I haven't seen, like, the founding papers or anything, but I think he's the only founder in that case.
Okay. Yeah, because...
I've never seen anyone else called a co-founder.
Okay. Well, I mean, just because the original releases for it already named several other companies being involved, so I wasn't sure if the San Mateo software... whatever it was called was co-owned right from the get-go. I mean, or if he starts it and then brings in the partners.
Yeah. I think it was originally something founded inside EA, and then he kind of expanded it out from there. But I believe he is the only founder of 3DO in the technical sense, and also he is the only founder of Electronic Arts in the technical sense, but you can quibble on the edges of that on the moral side. But yeah, that will be all for January of 2002. Apologies if this particular Department of Corrections comes through a bit strangely. I'm out on the road, so I'm doing what I can.
Don't worry, I'll cut most of it out anyway.
Oh, look. This Carl. All right. Well, back to the dungeons with you. We'll see you next time for the February of 1982 jumps.
Yes.
And 1982, 1992, and 2002. See you then.
See you then, man. Thanks as always. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, that wasn't too bad, was it?
No, it was kind of nice. And Ethan really would like to know more about your development history for mobile phones.
Yeah, well, I've ever since the very first release of the iPhone, I started writing so much Objective-C and stuff like that for the iPhone and the first generation iPad as well. So I've made lots of apps that were used as kind of like games actually for museum exhibits, for example. So we had some really, really talented graphics artists at the company I was working at. So they would draw up stuff and we would bring it to life. So lots of fun little stuff using phones there. So but actually the most fun stuff I have been doing for museum exhibits wasn't even for mobile phones. It was more embedded stuff. So, for example, I've made a huge shark filled with sensors so that it would react whenever the kids would come up and touch it in different places. It would react, and some stuff would be told about the different parts of the shot that you were touching. So watching all of the little kids being frightened whenever they touched the shark and it would react to it, that was great fun.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Oh my goodness.
Mm.
Have you listened to my interview with Jerry Jewell yet?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, okay. He was basically a game developer back in the day, but for the last 20 plus years, he runs a company and he specializes in making robotic skeletons and stuff for Halloween displays and for movies.
Yeah.
And he goes into that. Let me know after the show. I can send you the video of that interview because he's actually doing it from his shop, and he's working on the stuff, and he's got the stuff all over around him, and had to cut a bunch of stuff for time. But the video version of that interview is quite fun just because he's showing off, the different kind of mechanics and the program and the stuff that is computerized in there and stuff.
Yeah.
But that sounds awesome. Do you have video of that? Of like the shark and stuff?
I actually don't know. It's been many years. So I'm not sure, man. But I think actually that exhibit is still active. So and it's only like an hour's drive away from where I live. So I should go there and check it out at some point.
Have you ever showed it to your girls?
Yeah, I have. My middle kid, she got so scared by there was another shark exhibit as well with a great white that suddenly pops out of a screen. Ooh. And she got so scared that she didn't want to see the rest of the exhibit.
Oh.
Yeah. But doing stuff like that, actually, it's good fun to build stuff that's so like it's something different than just doing your normal software programming, of course. But what you really learn something about is how destructive kids are. Because what we use, if you say we use 50% of the time to actually build the stuff, we'd use the other 50% either fixing it because it's been broken or battle hardening it, making it so that you can't possibly break this thing. Because if there's something you can do to break it in an exhibit, it'll be broken at some point because the kids are just crazy.
Oh, yeah. Now, are you talking them physically damaging the equipment?
Yes, physically damaging it, yes.
Oh. Yeah, kids can be jerks.
Yeah.
Okay. It's time to turn on the time machine. We're heading back to February of 2002.
Ooh, only a 20-year jump. I feel young when we don't jump further than that. That's good.
Well, if you're here for the next episode, we got to go way back. Okay, that's a little preview. So, let's turn on the time machine.
I think this guy's the one for 2002. The demographic harsh.
Welcome to February of 2002. Mads, what's our first story?
Sony sues over mod chips.
Sony has launched a lawsuit against Channel Technology out of Wales, makers of the Messiah mod chip for the PS2. The chip allows for playing of both copied games and unlocks regional lockouts of both games and DVDs. Sony would ultimately win this case and several more in Europe over the coming years as they play whack-a-mole with mod chip manufacturers.
So in my experience, there were no mod chips for the PS2. PS1, yes, lots and lots of mod chips. I never really saw the PS2 mod chips back in the day. It's only recently, a handful of years ago, I picked up a PS2 at a flea market, and then turned out it had a mod chip in it.
Oh, no, the mod chips for the PS2 were out there.
Yeah.
I believe there's actually an episode, and you can find this online, an episode of the American TV show The People's Court, where actual people suing, and this guy sues a tech shop for not properly installing a mod chip in his PS2. Okay. And he takes him to court, and the judge is like, what did you do? Mod chip. It allows you to play, backups. You mean illegal copies? Yeah. And she's just like, you're telling a judge that you hired somebody to commit a crime, right? To aid you in committing a crime, right? So yeah. But the PS2 mod chips were there, but Sony was much, much more active in trying to take down the mod chip manufacturers this time.
Okay.
So it was far more complicated to install than in the original.
Yeah.
But it was possible.
Okay. I guess probably because it was harder to install would also mean that less of them were sold, because I installed my mod chip in my original PlayStation 1, for example, and I'm really no good with the soldering iron, but it works, still works to this day, actually. And I'd never be able to install one of those PS2 chips.
No. These things, I remember a buddy of mine looked into it back in the day, and he just was like, nah, it's not worth it. And the PlayStation 2, I mean, it's been out at this point for a little bit, but it also had the big, huge advantage that it was such a large install base, and used software became so readily available so quickly that it wasn't that big of a deal, I don't think.
Okay.
And, well, there's our next story also helps answer why you might not bother with a mod chip.
So in another attempt to thwart the mod chips, Sony launches budget line in Japan.
A further weapon has been added to Sony's PS2 arsenal in the fight for market share. The Mega Hits line of budget re-releases of titles that have already sold at least 500,000 units in Japan. First mover advantage is a wonderful thing.
So is this the line that was called Platinum in Europe? I mean, I remember they had these Platinum releases that would be only, something along the lines of 25 euros, I think it would be in today's money. Yeah.
That's exactly. And I think it was also called Platinum in the States, but I could be wrong on that. But yeah, so they did this, of course, also with the original PlayStation, and it was something that you couldn't really do with cartridge-based games. I mean, Sega had done it to a certain extent with their multi-game carts.
Yes.
As a budget release, but you still were paying the same outlay, or the original outlay was the same as a normal cart, just you got a whole bunch of games.
Yeah.
But this idea of getting the individual titles for less is something that's really only possible with the CD-based systems. And I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look up whether or not this is in a similar timeline to when they did it with the PlayStation. It's very possible, but it also cannot be understated how important this is happening at the same time that the GameCube and the Xbox are. Because what it really means is, hey, it's even more attractive than it was before, because now if you buy the PS2, there's also a whole bunch of cheap software to be had in addition to the full price title.
Yeah, definitely gives them an advantage.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in Japan at this point they've been out for 2 years, and in Europe and in the States they've been out for 1 year. But 1 second, it's going to drive me nuts if I don't do this because Ethan Head. Let's see, PS2 launch in North America was 2000. No, so it's already 2 years. It's a year and 3-4 months. So, okay. So, yeah, the PlayStation 2 has been out in Japan for almost 2 years at this point, a month shy of 2 years, and in North America about a year and a half.
Okay.
And in Europe, a month less than that. So we're definitely dealing with a relatively quick move to the greatest hits line, but it's probably still in line with the PS1, but it's still nice timing to go up against on the new consoles.
And probably they didn't even need to do that, because what really sold the PS2 over the GameCube was the DVD player.
Yeah, the DVD player and the more adult games. I mean, there's a great quote in one of the magazines this month from Shigeru Miyamoto, where he says, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but then again, I was reading a German translation of his quote, so where he said, Nintendo is competing with Sony insofar as the customer has to decide which system to buy. But as far as games are concerned, we're not competing with anybody. AKA, our games are so superior that, we're not really in competition. Nobody does product like us.
But that is the truth. I'm sorry to say.
It is the truth to a certain extent. It is a truth to a certain extent, but it's also just a tad bit pretentious.
Oh yes.
And again, Grand Theft Auto 3.
True, that's a good game.
It's a complete paradigm shift. And so the question is, was there a competition product in that category for Nintendo? Not really. Nintendo has an amazing IP library, but there are still holes in it. It's not infallible. But yeah.
True.
It is an interesting perspective from their standpoint. So, okay.
So, next piece of news here is EA drops EA.com.
Electronic Arts' attempt to create a monthly fee-based gaming portal has failed. We spoke last month about the announced layoffs of the division, and this month their Platinum subscription service, which gave you access to online play on select EA games, as well as several planned titles for the platform, have been canceled. Games affected include Air Warrior 3, Triple Play Baseball, and Tiger Woods PGA Tour Web Golf. Despite having acquired companies such as Pogo.com and Kesme, there was insufficient appetite for a subscription-based system for online play. The company still has 25 million registered users that are playing 2.6 billion minutes of games a month on the free offering.
So this would all have been on the PC, right?
This would have all been PC.
Yeah. At this point in time, we weren't used to paying to play on online.
Quite the contrary. You weren't used to not paying. Okay. Remember, this is still the early days of online play. The few attempts to have free online play.
So there was some like the 10 network and what was the other one? GameSpy? Those two would be active around this point in time.
They would be active around this. GameSpy is active. 10 has already been renamed and purchased by somebody else. Actually, I believe 10 was Pogo.com. So 10 became Pogo, and then Pogo was bought up by EA. The problem here was that the cost of the networks and the cost of the internet time at this point is still very high.
Yeah.
And the number of people playing is too much. Now the game, and there's really no model for making money because the whole idea of buying premiums in game hadn't really caught on in the West yet. It's already in existence in Korea, but it hasn't caught on in the West. So the idea here was that EA had, and again, this is one of those places where I'm going to have to plug my existing interview catalog. If you go back and check my 2-part interview with Gordon Walton, whose career has basically always been in online, and he was working on EA.com for a while. He was at Kesme before that. And he also worked on Ultima Online around this time. The problem was that EA was in the business of selling you a box with a disc in it. And then they also wanted to charge you every month to play online. And the idea of having a game that was purely online was difficult for a couple of reasons. Number one, downloading the software, AAA level software, would have taken you far too long on a 28.8 or 33.6 modem. So you kind of were still stuck with that disc in a box.
I guess that's just you having slow connections. I mean, at this point in time, I would have a ADSL connection, 256 kilobit, I guess. Along those lines.
But were you paying by the minute? Or did you have a flat? No. In 2002, you had flat?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay. Then you were way ahead of Germany, because in Germany, they were lucky if they had 128K and they were still paying by the minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, see,
128K, so that would be a dual ISDN line, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That around 98, 99, something like that.
Yeah. See, and this is one of those big differences. A lot of different countries had very different standards. in the States in 2002, cable modem was just beginning to take off and get wide distribution. This is where the cable companies became the primary internet providers. Yep. But that's not really going to take full hold until maybe 2004, 2005.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people who are still stuck, and EA.com they've been trying to run this model for at least a year and a half at this. And that's why they put all this money into it. They started the plan during the .com boom. The .com bubble burst in 2001. So not only that, but EA is a public company. Anything with .com in the title is suddenly poison in the markets.
I remember that.
And so the idea of how are we going to make money off of this just didn't add up. Plus, they also did not include Ultima Online in this flat fee, which was their big online cash cow, because everybody was still paying a monthly fee to play UO.
Yeah.
And they refused to include that. Sims Online is also a clusterfuck. Again, Gordon talks about how that project became a total dumpster fire. And they pushed out the door just because they needed to make the numbers for the quarter, even though there was no game there yet.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So the real problem here is they have not figured out you make money on online by letting people play for free and then charge them for pretty hats or wrapping your gun in bacon.
I still don't get that, but
I don't get it either. But if you're investing that much time in that in a competitive online game where you want to stand out of the crowd, I understand it suddenly a little bit, just a little bit.
I guess there's a shift again now, but now we're getting modern because now everybody's getting more and more used to these subscription services like paying for Disney and Netflix and HBO and Microsoft Game Pass for that matter. So I guess there's a change there. So that'll be the standard instead. Well,
and that's the ones where you get all these games for free, included in the subscription.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like Netflix. Instead of going to the video store and renting individual movies, you pay the flat fee and then you find what you want to play. And it's interesting here because this is all coming from reporting in Computer Gaming World magazine. And they are extremely derisive of this entire concept of making money online. They do that in a couple of different ways throughout the magazine, because there's also an article about, online gaming journalism, how it can't make any money and stuff because, they're a print magazine that's been around for forever. And in addition to that, they're talking about, all these people are playing, but they're not paying. So, what's the point? And the ad market had just collapsed. And they also have an interesting little article about a program hub called Real Arcade, which is run by the people who did from Real Networks, the Real Player people. So the online streaming video service from back in the day.
Yeah.
And that was basically just a hub that linked to a bunch of Flash games. And so, there are games that you're playing for free. And we've talked, about Bejeweled. Peggle is going to become the number one game on EA.com for a long time, which then they're going to package and resell and reinvent a million more times. So it's one of those things where this is this whole new moment, and dumping all these box games that you are going to then have to pay to play online is just one of those growing pains that is going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, TV is getting interactive.
Sky Television is bringing interactive TV, or ITV as it is called, to millions of subscribers. The games are harnessing the computational power of existing set-top boxes to deliver simple games to users' TV sets. Of the 16 games available at the time, Edge magazine reported on this, around 2/3 of them are free to play, and some offer additional options such as high score tables and live competitions for an extra per minute fee. Many of the games are branded based on TV shows or board games, but some also include ports of existing video games such as Tetris and Denki Blocks.
So how is this served to the set-top boxes? Was it pre-installed on them, or did they have some way of broadcasting it out?
They had a way of downloading it to the system, as far as I can tell. I actually included a YouTube video showing how the system worked in the show notes. Remember, everybody, links to everything that we're talking about are in the show notes. And you basically had this list of games that was similar to the list of programs that you could call up as video-on-demand programs.
Okay.
And so as far as I can tell, you just downloaded it to the system and it ran on the system that way. And the games look like, your typical Flash games that you would play at the time on a TV show's website, as promotional material. Like they have a picture of a Dexter's Lab game. Great show, by the way. I miss that.
Controlled with the remote?
Controlled with the remote.
Okay.
Blended into options, the 4 little colored buttons that you get on European television controllers, did different things. And then you use the normal controller that you would have with a high-end cable box, for digital but television or something.
Okay.
Yeah. Not the best way to play a game in the world, but it is showing, the whole free-to-play with premium service add-on concept is here. So it's a nice contrast with EA not figuring that out.
Yeah. So speaking of uncomfortable controllers for games, Street Fighter 2 is coming to mobile.
Oh, yeah. THQ Wireless is working to release a cell phone version of Street Fighter 2. This is the latest in the ever-expanding library of classic games making it to handsets.
And a wonderful example of a game that should never have come to a cell phone, because you need an arcade stick and 6 buttons to play that.
Yes, and I have a personal experience with it.
Oh, yeah.
I was in court. This is probably 2007.
So what did you do?
2008. No.
Not on that side of the bench.
I'm not going to name names. It was a state attorney who shall remain nameless, but who's a doofus. Okay, and he was sitting there in court playing this exact version of Street Fighter 2 on his mobile phone. It wasn't a smartphone. It was an old school Java mobile phone.
Yeah.
And he's playing Street Fighter 2. And I looked over his shoulders, and I swear to God, it looked like they had ported the Amiga version. Because the colors had that same exact washed out look. I could swear to you, they grabbed the graphics off of the Amiga or Atari ST port.
And while the listeners know that you and I love our Amigas, the Amiga port of Street Fighter 2 is not really it's not a high bar to sit there.
No, and I am the guy who I own a copy of it.
You do?
Box copy? Oh, yes. Oh, I had it as a pirated copy. I played the living bejesus out of it.
You're crazy.
I played through it with every single character. I got all the endings. I was obsessed with this. And it did not seem all that slow because I had nothing other than body blows to compare it to, and that was much, much worse.
True.
I mean, that game is I don't care how much the Team 17 diehards want to praise it, is an utter piece of shit. And yeah, bring it on, people. Team 17 bait Super Frog. That's it. Okay? I'm laying down that gauntlet.
Worms.
Well, they didn't actually make that. That came to them.
So, they hired the guy who made it, didn't they?
No. The game was basically done. They just gave it the graphical polish.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll give them that one.
Well, I thought they actually hired the guy who came with the game.
No, well, they may have hired him, but the game was already pre-made.
Yeah.
As far as I know the story, but it doesn't matter. Okay, Worms, I'll give them that one too. But that was at the end of the Amiga. That was their last Amiga release. Worms Director's Cut was. Yeah. But still.
Alien Breed? Sorry?
No. And it never clicked with me. I mean, it's an interesting title, but it always lacked the depth I felt. You know, it was just basically didn't even have the depth of a Gauntlet. You know, because Gauntlet, at least you had 4 different types of characters with different stats. You know, you had the strategy of destroying the generators and stuff. Alien Breed was very polished in its graphics, except for the main sprite, the main sprite is terrible looking. Okay, you have to admit.
Funny, yeah.
And you can't upgrade your armor, at least not visually and stuff. There's a charm missing from Alien Breed for me. But okay, I get it. We're getting off on tangents. It's like, it would have been great if I hadn't played Gauntlet on the C64 5 years earlier. Which is a sad thing to say. Okay. But I'm getting lost on it. But yeah, Street Fighter 2, I've seen this one in action, and I've seen the type of people that were playing it. And yeah. Now, granted, I also played Street Fighter 2 on the iPhone way too much, and that was a pain in the ass to play as well with the 6 buttons, but I still did it. So
yeah, I
guess, yeah, get your Street Fighter 2 any way you can.
Okay. I've never understood people playing these kind of games on an iPhone, for example. I mean, I don't want to use touch controls for that. Nope, not for me. Not for me. It's
lack of alternatives, and then it was also just the fact that you could do it. I also had Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the iPhone. It was an insane thing to actually be trying to play.
It's the wrong game to be playing. I remember jailbreaking my iPhone so I could put Scum VM on there. Now there's some good games to play with touch controls.
Yes. Scum VM on an iPhone was great. Occasionally back in the day, they'd actually slip in MAME. There was this thing that the people would do is they would find a public domain ROM that worked in MAME.
Yeah.
Release it on the iPhone, on the iStore, and get it approved because it was, a game.
Yeah.
But that game then became your back door because you could upload the MAME ROMs, and then if you did the right thing inside the game, you could activate the MAME menu and then just load all the other ROMs that were in storage.
Uh-huh.
And it worked as long as you didn't update the phone.
Yeah.
Because the next time you updated the phone, the game was no longer accessible.
Oh, of course.
But so I had that a couple of times.
Okay.
If you knew the right pages to check, they would give you those warnings, this game is on there, and you'd have to download it because you had like 2 hours before they would get shut down.
Yeah.
I miss those days on the iStore, back when it was fun.
So, next piece of news here, non-Street Fighter 2 news. Edge Magazine profiles game consultancy.
Yeah, this one was interesting. International Hobo and Script Monkey are game design and dialogue scripting companies that provide consulting services to game developers to help them punch up scripts or deliver full game designs. iHobo founder Chris Bateman is hoping that this kind of outside service will become an industry standard, even though he often can't talk about the games he has worked on.
So Edge Magazine actually not publishing stuff that's for the gamers, but for the game developers?
Oh, Edge Magazine always has stuff like this, yeah.
It's kind of inside baseball there.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what it's like nowadays, but these old issues, some amazing articles about new development tools. I mean, it's not a huge portion, but you'll always get at least 4 or 5 pages of stuff that's inside baseball with, actual designers and people in the industry writing very, very deep and sometimes very technical opinion pieces. And this I thought was just fascinating because there's a whole mess of these companies out there. These in-between service people that never get any kind of credit. International Hobo is still out there today. And when you go to their website, there's only a handful of games listed that they've done, that they're admitting to doing.
Okay. But they must have been doing something else in between, I guess.
They've probably done a billion things, and I'm sure that there's a bunch of big-time designers that just don't want anybody to know that, somebody else came in and punched up the script.
Yeah.
And I have sent out a request for an interview. I don't know if I'm going to get one, but I want to talk to this guy so bad.
I wonder what he can tell you, what he's allowed to tell you.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and this is one of those weird things. Like we took a little break in between. I looked up the lead designer on Fish Files, and if you look at his Moby Games thing, once the development company that made that game went under, there's no further listing. I looked him up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
He's still working in the business. And it's some mobile company doing something. And I'm just like, how many people, and we as people doing, and I do not count myself really as a game history researcher. Okay. I do this weird little show where I look stuff up every month and that's it. But a lot of people really rely on Moby Game. And there's this whole category, this gigantic category of people who are really deep into game design who don't show up there because it's all in the mobile arena. And so it's kind of cool to just see that already 20 years ago, there's this, I don't want to call it shadow industry, but this other layer that, you think about the tools, like, the 3D modeling software or sound editing tools and all this stuff, where you're like, okay, I obviously understand there's game engines and stuff like this, and those developers aren't getting credit in the final product, but you can look up the names of the people who made those tools and the credits for those tools. But this is this other level of the content advisory, the content punching up that doesn't get credited. And I'd love to know just how expansive this industry is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody who's in this industry happens to listen to this show and wants to come on and talk about it and give us some inside baseball, just drop me a line. The email and Twitter feeds are all in the show notes. Just drop me a line. I want to know. Okay.
So let's get back to the fighting games then. King of Fighters goes online.
Korean developer Unotech plans on releasing King of Fighters Online, a 3D fighting game MMO that has you taking the role of one of the 6 main characters from the series, with more to be unlocked.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around 3D fighting game MMO.
Yeah. Now, there's a couple of screenshots of this in Edge magazine this month. And I've got some other links to stuff about this. And it looks like it's like this open world, think, very sunny, almost like something out of Crazy Taxi looking world. And you see the King of Fighter characters walking around, talking to other characters, and apparently that, you can trigger fights or whatever else. So it's like a big MMO where you're just, in this world where fights take place, apparently. That's just from the screenshots. Now, there's a wrinkle with this because they're talking about this, but we talked about SNK going under last month, where SNK closed its doors. And that is going to complicate the development of this game. Because it is still in development. They're talking about it being released, sometime later on. And I have a link to this also in the show notes. I went through the web archive of their website, and for part of the time they had a version in English and a version in Korean. Then after a while they only have the version in Korean. So I ran it through Google Translate, did the usual stuff. So what I could discern that there was an open beta for the game that ran in April of 2003. So a year plus later. And that was then shut down. But this game is never, as far as I can tell, never actually going to come to fruition. And that has a little something with
SNK. Story. Yes, because SNK is back.
We reported on the death of SNK last month, and the makers of the We reported on the death of SNK, the makers of the Neo Geo, last month. Well, Japanese pachinko maker Playmore has acquired the SNK assets and breathed new life into their franchises.
Yeah.
And this is, I can't say it for certain, but I'm guessing that this is where the conflict comes in. At some point in this whole drama, and I have a link to a German news report about this in the show notes, the Unotech is allowed to continue to develop their 3D fighting game, They are allowed to use 3D models that look like the characters from King of Fighters, but they're no longer at some point allowed to use the actual names of the characters. Probably because they'd already done too much work developing it all.
Yeah.
And so that was the compromise, and the game just never takes off because, if you can't actually use the character names, you lost the license and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know if it's directly because Playmore buys it. I don't know if it was because the contract that they had expired or some shenanigans happened. But so King of Fighters Online is not going to happen, but SNK Playmore, which is going to be the name of the company, and when this purchase gets announced, they're all talking about a new company called SNK Neo Geo, but ultimately it's going to be SNK Playmore, and they're going to continue releasing titles for the Neo Geo and also bringing those titles to other systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So SNK is back. We talked about them dying last month. They're back. So
Yes.
in some form.
Brief death.
Yes.
So Minoru Arakawa steps down.
President of Nintendo of America, Minoru Arakawa, steps down after 22 years. The man who shepherded Nintendo's U.S. operations since the beginning and son-in-law of Nintendo patriarch Hiroshi Yamauchi is leaving the company. This comes after announcements by both Yamauchi and Howard Lincoln in 1999 that they will be stepping down as well.
So who was the president after Arakawa then?
That is a question I do not know. But ultimately, it's pretty safe to say nobody in Nintendo of America is ever going to be as influential as Arakawa.
Okay.
Because we've talked about him also already in our 40-year jump. When he set up an office in New York, we thought that was the place to be, even though the main operations were in Seattle. That doesn't go well, and that's when they were introducing the game that would not sell very well and be replaced by Donkey Kong, which would sell very, very well. And ultimately, and there's a lot of stuff that's sort of shrouded in mystery. I talked to Ethan briefly about this before the show just to get some of the facts straight, because some of the stories and rumors go that he steps down because he was passed over for the position of head of Nintendo of Japan, which he thought, this is the rumor. There's totally unsubstantiated, nothing really to back it up. That says that after Hiroshi said that he was going to step down, that Arakawa thought he was going to get the position. And when that didn't happen, then he decided to step down. Howard Lincoln, however, had already become I believe he's the chairman of the board, or the CEO of Nintendo of America. And he gets more power. He has more power than Arakawa. And the thinking is that Yamauchi demoted Arakawa because Arakawa allowed Sega to take as much ground as it did.
Okay.
That he saw that as weakness. That's another one of the going theories. I think that one's a little bit more substantiated. So it's Arakawa probably was never going to get the top job because of that. But, it could also be, and this was Ethan's thought, and I think it is probably more correct. This was a long 22, long 22 years. He had to go through a lot of stuff. And there's no faulting the man for saying, you know what, peace out, and doing a mic drop.
Yeah.
And so, it's a perfectly legit approach. And that's this old guard of Nintendo, the people who brought the NES to the market and stuff, just being like, we've done our time. We are now slowly but surely stepping back.
And Yamauchi stepping back would leave place for Satoru Iwata. Isn't that true?
Exactly. Iwata is going to take over in Nintendo of Japan. I'm not sure if... Yeah, I don't know who takes over Nintendo of America. I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
But yeah, all of that is coming.
Yes.
It might be Philomane. Reggie Fils-Aimé, but there may have been somebody before him. I'm not sure anymore.
No,
Yeah.
no, me neither. Yeah. So in other news, Nvidia takes Enron's place on S&P.
The collapse of energy trading firm Enron has opened up a spot on the Standard & Poor's 500 stock index, and chip maker Nvidia has moved right in where it is still today and ranks as the 8th highest weighted stock on the at least as of this record.
Okay. Yeah, well, they are printing money, and but I'm guessing right now they're being hit by the chip shortage as hard as anybody else.
Definitely, but it hasn't really seemed to have affected. I mean, they're selling as much as they can. I mean, it's a zero inventory situation.
Yes.
So I can't see that that's really going to be hurting them. It's just a question of, you could sell even more. Well, that would be nice. Yeah, I haven't looked at their stock lately. But the fact that a company like Nvidia is making it onto the Standard & Poor's, video chips, who would have thought that was going to be a big business?
Yeah.
Is kind of, kick-ass, and just shows the importance of the industry and how it's grown.
Yeah. So IBM exits desktop business.
IBM has announced that they will be handing over their desktop computer operations to Sanmina SCI. While they will still manufacture servers and ThinkPad notebooks for now, this is the first major step to a complete divestment of their small-scale computer manufacturing operations, which will take place over the coming decade.
Yeah, very soon the ThinkPads will go to Lenovo as well.
Exactly. And they're also going to get rid of the server manufacturer.
Yeah.
So ultimately, IBM is shifting to becoming a service industry.
Yes.
In many ways similar to what they were originally when they got into computers, when the computers were so expensive that companies would just lease them or, buy data time, which is wink, wink, something we may be talking about next month.
Mm-hmm.
In our next episode, when we go back in time to the 40-plus year jumps. There's a story about that. So, IBM basically leaving the PC business that they invented, or at least as we know it today.
Yeah. So another big play in the PC business. Rumors suggest Microsoft to buy Take-Two.
After having purchased Mac gaming powerhouse Bungie to secure Halo as an Xbox launch title, Microsoft is rumored to be eyeing Take-Two, the publisher behind such games as Stronghold, Tropico, and the recently released GTA 3, to make them Xbox game providers. Given their current slate of upcoming titles, including Mafia, Hidden and Dangerous 2, and the hopefully soon-to-launch Duke Nukem Forever, they would be a perfect fit.
You make a merry jest. Duke Nukem Forever.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I guess they never did buy Take-Two, did they?
No, they did not buy Take-Two. It would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know how much truth there was to this rumor, but it popped up in virtually every magazine I read for this month, for this jump. And so I thought it would be an interesting one to bring in, especially given now that 20 years later, the idea of Microsoft and Sony purchasing developers left, right, and center, and publishers, not just developers, but publishers, in order to secure exclusive IP, they just imagine if they had bought Take-Two and had control of GTA as an Xbox exclusive.
Yeah.
A completely different history.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, Wizardry 9 cancelled.
According to Wizardry 8 designer Linda Curry, Wizardry 9 and 10, as well as Jagged Alliance 3, all games that had already been in development, will not move forward due to the financial troubles besetting publisher Surtech. The well-known publisher's original U.S. offices closed in 1998, and the Canadian subsidiary had kept operations going, but Wizardry 8, released in 2001, saw limited distribution in the U.S., being an electronics boutique exclusive, and no European distribution had been secured so far.
So haven't you interviewed somebody from Surtech that worked at Surtech?
No, I haven't actually done anything. No, well, I take that back. Paul Neurath. I think you're thinking of Paul Neurath, right?
It could be.
Of Looking Glass fame.
Yes.
Okay, and he was up in the same neck of the woods as Surtech.
Okay.
And no, you're right. He released his first game was a Surtec release.
Okay.
It was a space game, Deep Space something, and that was a Surtec title. And then later on, he started publishing through Origin. So Paul Neurath, he did some work with Surtec back in the 80s. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I completely forgot about that.
I just remembered, but actually Brenda Romero, didn't she actually start her career at Surtec? I think
yes, she did. Brenda Romero was working on the Wizardry games.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Wizardry, I mean, is like the granddaddy of this all. There's a great episode of friend of the show Alex Smith's podcast, They Create Worlds. He did a whole history of Surtec and the Wizardry series. I'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure that the Retro Hour had an interview with Brenda Romero at some point as well, not too long ago, where she talked about her time at Surtec.
Exactly. And I mean, Surtec is this very legendary company. The Wizardry series is marred by all sorts of weirdness. Like the first few games, you could only play the first couple sequels if you had imported a party from the first game.
Yes, I remember that.
Weirdness like this. And Wizardry 8 took forever to release. Gets amazing reviews, despite, I believe, it being quite buggy. But the problem was that they just couldn't find a publisher for it at that point. Because a lot of people thought the Wizardry name was as good as dead.
Yeah.
And, only being an electronics boutique isn't all that bad at this point, but you needed the mass market of a Walmart.
Yeah.
Okay. And without that, you were only going to be selling to the niche hardcore audience. And Europe was dying to get it. And they do finally get a European release. But I don't think it's for another year or so. It's the whole thing is a mess. And they had been living off of the Japanese sublicensing of Wizardry for a long time. Because in Japan, Wizardry was huge, and it was this whole extra universe with anime and all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
But most of the Japanese content starts diverging largely from the American content.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a big thing, and of course, Jagged Alliance is very tactical strategy game, which also not really, not your mainstream console friendly content at this point in time.
No, they were definitely into some more hardcore and nerdy stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's a market for that. It's just, as we've seen nowadays, and again, I'll make another point here, Joel Billings, from founder of SSI, he's still making games today, but he does his hardcore military strategy titles, and they get released online exclusively.
Yeah.
And they can make a good business off of it because they're selling directly to that hardcore audience worldwide. That's just not an option yet in 2002. Especially not for a game, that's eating up, multiple CDs.
No.
Downloading that is just never going to happen.
Okay. So, Germany cracks down on Wolfenstein.
Return to Castle Wolfenstein and Medal of Honor, two of the biggest FPS titles in years, are both coming under scrutiny in Germany. Despite not having landed on the dreaded Index, the official list of media products that cannot be displayed at retail or advertised or sold to people under 18, their use of Nazi symbols makes them illegal works that can get importers up to 3 years in jail. Movies and TV shows can get away with the use of these symbols, but that's because they count as art and not toys.
Oh, so they were completely removed from shelves.
Well, they weren't completely removed from shelves. At this point, the games, neither one of them has an official German release yet.
Okay.
And there will be German releases, but they will have all the swastikas and the SS symbols and so forth removed or replaced.
Yes, okay.
A similar thing happened with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. When it gets released as in Germany, They removed all the swastikas and replaced them, I think, with crosses, or just left the flags without symbols and stuff.
Oh, okay. I never knew.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's still a huge deal in Germany, and all the subsequent sequels, even to this day, have to get all of that stuff removed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the final piece of news, Carl is trying to make me read something in Spanish. So,
yes.
Las Malvinas son Argentinas?
Las Malvinas son Argentinas. I was hoping Chris would be here for this one, but oh well. Argentinian games developer Sabarasa has announced Malvinas 2032, an RTS that allows the player to try to retake the Falkland Islands, known as the Malvinas in Argentina, from the British in the futuristic setting of 2032. The game looks absolutely terrible and intersperses an historical timeline of the 1982 conflict throughout the game.
What on earth is this, Carl? Why did you include this?
I included this because I grew up in Argentina.
Ah, yes. Okay.
So the slogan Las Malvinas son Argentinas, the Malvinas Islands belong to Argentina.
Yes. It's
actually on a giant, when you fly into Argentina and into the main international airport in Buenos Aires, Ezeiza, the road leaving the airport, they have a giant sign saying this, the picture of the islands. It's one of these things that I grew up constantly being, reminded of. And it's funny that one of the first commercial games developed in Argentina that I've run across, it has this theme. And it's also the first game from this developer. And they will go on to develop some other stuff. They do some contract work. They even have a SpongeBob game in there someplace. But yeah, it's absolutely terrible. It actually makes Dune 2 on the Amiga look good by comparison. It's that level of game engine.
In 2002.
In 2002.
And it wasn't even done by 2002. It was just announced, right?
Well, it was just announced, but I also looked at the web page, and I think you could already buy it in Argentina at this point. Now, granted, remember, February is always a little bit different, so by the time I look at the website, the archive version in February, it's like 2 to 3 months after this article would have been written for the magazine. So when exactly the release date came out, I don't know. But they do announce on there, and I looked at the website over several years to see how it developed. But yes, they did actually release it. I also found video of it on YouTube, so that's all in the show notes. And it's quite bizarre because like you play a little bit of the game and then it'll just stop and there's a still image of some Argentine generals and it's giving you, day by day what happened in the conflict. And it's not good. But it is an interesting sort of, how do you make a game, or how do you take the very, very limited resources you have as a startup studio in a third world country and make a game that people will want to buy despite the fact that they have access to much better software. And it's creating a title that is super, super specific for this one, market. Super, super specific, appealing to a nationalism theme.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the Edge magazine, because they're British, are just like, oh, they're just British bashing and blah, blah, blah. And they're getting all incensed about it. So it was a fun little moment in time for the 20th anniversary of this conflict.
Yeah. And with that, we're through, mate.
That's it.
Yes.
So one last task, Mads. What is the word of the episode?
So I'm really struggling to find something that's a common theme today, because I think we've been pretty much all over, but a lot of it is online. We're, of course, being a 20-year jump, we're talking a lot about online gaming and the internet and distribution over the internet. So let's go with a nice and simple online.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, this was an episode where you could really tell all the articles were probably written right before Christmas for the February issues, and the lull was there. Nobody really knew, what to report on. And so it's the lull before the storm to find out what the Christmas sales season really did.
Okay.
Yeah. So, because, I mean, we talked already last month about the console launches and how Microsoft and Gamecube are vying for, number 2 spot behind the PS2.
Yeah.
The real truth of the matter will be not the launch, but who sold what at Christmas. And it's going to take another month or two before we really get those numbers.
Yeah.
So, okay, then, Mads, as always, thank you so very much. Where can people find you?
They can find me at the Retro Asylum, where I podcast about all things retro gaming-wise, and at the Playthrough podcast, where I play modern middle-aged games along with some friends in a more long-form book club style. So that's where they can find me online.
Excellent, and those links are in the show notes below. Well then, everybody, until next time, have fun.
Bye.